ברוך אתה אדוני מלך העולם שהחיינו וקיימנו והגיענו לזמן הזה. The graduation ceremony of the Jerusalem Center for Bible Translators. Bruchim habayim. I will talk about why and where, and Miriam will talk about what. Because we were both teaching for years at another institution in Jerusalem. I as the head of a 2-year MA program in historical geography, and Miriam as the head of a 2-year program in Hebrew, where you needed to speak modern Hebrew and know to dig out the truths of biblical Hebrew in order to get that MA degree. And at that time, there even was a new department created for Bible translators, so that they could learn the language of the Bible in the land of the Bible. But we found out that some scattered Bible translators from around the world came from very different backgrounds than the mostly American students. And so my motherly wife said, what we really need is a home where their needs can be catered to, where all their needs will be taken care of except they can just concentrate on the studies. And there ended up being an administrative change so that we approached the Rothberg School with this vision of an MA for Bible translators. Well, that turned out to be more time and money than most Bible translators could ever dream of. And so what happened was that when we approached the Rothberg School in 1994 and said, look, you're training medical doctors, you're training farmers in your different programs for people from abroad, what are you doing for Bible translators? Doesn't everybody have the Bible? No. There are 7,000 languages in the world, and even now, only a tenth have a translation of the Hebrew Bible, 700 or so. So the short of it was that the Rothberg School, and it turned out that we even knew personally some of the officials from student days earlier, just really adopted the program and have supported it and have been incredibly helpful all the way along now for the 24th session. This is not the 25th year of the 5-month program, because we had a program all set in Spanish and then the drug wars in Mexico made it fall through. So this is actually the 24th class in the 5-month programs. And then we have, more recent decade, developed also 2-week programs, Land of the Bible programs. So I'm the Land of the Bible, historical geography. Miriam is the language of the Bible. And our dream then was not just land and language, but mother tongue Bible translators. They already know their own culture. It's not like training a European in Hebrew, a foreign language, and then some other target language, another foreign language, and going from one foreign language to another. Let the mother tongue speakers learn the original and then go right from the original into their own mother tongue. And now that idea has been adopted by others as well, so we're finding our niche in focusing on what's been a bottleneck in Bible translation, and that's what's called the consultants. Usually a Bible translator would need somebody who knows Hebrew or Greek to go over the translation for accuracy, but it turns out that most of these consultants who have to give the final word before you print the translations also know very little Hebrew. Some of them a lot, but most of them very little. So it means that out of these 700 translations that exist, most of them are translations of translations from different European languages and not from the Hebrew original. And in emergency you do what you can. But it's not, obviously, the ideal way. And so the vividness and the accuracy of translations done by people who know and love Hebrew are just so very different. And so when we get into this matter of the what of the program, we'll take a look at some of the actual courses that are being offered. Our concern is for truth, so that the Bible will be translated accurately. And that's one of the sismaot of my wife especially. She knows to dig and dig and dig. And I'll be sharing with you some of the student insights in a PowerPoint where I'll race through some of the kinds of things that are being learned, but she'll tell you about the program.
It's fun to see you sitting 2 meters apart when at home you don't sit like that. It's more like 20 centimeters. But that shouldn't be said loud anywhere, I guess, in this house. I thought that I would like to give my dream, which is actually happening in front of our eyes nowadays, and that is our aim is to really understand the text, open the Hebrew text and say, what is in there? How can I find everything about it? Or at least 90% of it. So you say, okay, you need to know the Hebrew language at least superficially. But then you really want to know the meaning. You have to go to the semantics. But even if you know that, do you still know to translate? No. So that you need the courses to be geared for translators, for those who are facing the question of how do I change this idea to the language that I'm serving. So the present program at the JCBT is very much, it's unique in that it's geared to translators. So that most of the teachers in the advanced language courses are consultants. Not only consultants for a while, but a lifetime consultancy. And so you know the program, of course, because you are taking it, but I wanted to share the ideal behind it. So here's the ideal. We don't emphasize modern Hebrew. Not that we are against modern Hebrew. I love modern Hebrew. But if you have 5 months to go, and that's all you have, put it for the task that is going to be in front of you in your faraway country. And because of that, we have then Living Biblical Hebrew, where you have the same idea. And I'm happy that some of the teachers are here. Opening your mouth and becoming part of you, but it's biblical Hebrew. The meaning of the words, that's the most important, right? So this year, we're very privileged to have Rainier de Blois, one of the leaders in the world on these semantics, teach here. And then Daniel Notarius and him gave a very powerful package. Again, I'm repeating myself. The idea is get to know the text as well as you ever can. The Hebrew text, the one that's going to be your challenge out there. But then the translation issues pop up in discourse analysis more than in the other courses. So we have Dr. Noah Lee, who has a lot of experience in discourse analysis, knows Hebrew very, very well. He studied in Israel 3 years. One of the rare consultants who know Hebrew very, very well. Of course, Dr. Mary Salisbury, who loves the Hebrew poetry and loves the Proverbs as well. So we're trying to have made here a package that is, at least in ideal situation, perfect. But in reality, of course, it's not going to be as perfect. But the concept of really taking that challenge of understanding the Hebrew text in all its levels, narrative text and poetry, and even Proverbs, is the ideal. Because you're going to be, most of you are consultants, you're going to be challenged when you go back. You learned very much, but like one of you told me, what do we do next? We're just at the beginning only. And now, where? Alva talked about why. I'm talking about what. But where? Where is the ideal back to study? Well, if I'm translating Dostoevsky, you better go to Russia and get to know its context, right? And some other literature You wouldn't translate without knowing Russian language, without never visiting Russia. In the level of literature, you don't allow that. When the Bible translation has been allowed years and years. The unique idea of text in the context, and that's one of the things that the students are going to now be presenting, what they get, a little bit of it. For one thing, the students didn't have much time because the program was very, very intensive. I see smiling faces and nods. Probably the most intensive program that has ever been. So if you put the academic hours together, you have over 400 hours of Hebrew. And in addition, the textual historical geography. Now, historical geography was the only class that was hampered by the corona, the only one. And in the last minute, in the last month, Halvor and Adam Pocht pushed it as much as possible. The first time Karedeshe was open in Galilee, our group was there. And so almost every day there has been a possibility to go. You have been going. That is a loss, but you have seen a lot. You have seen the land, you have seen the seasons, like some of you have been emphasizing. You have seen what does it mean, a rainy season. You understand what does it mean, everything is dry a little while now. You understand when certain fruit becomes ripe, and it tells you a lot just by implication when you see those fruits. So I'm very, very excited today that we came through. I would say you came through, because I want to say now publicly, for those who don't know the situation, that once our volunteers left the country, 7 of them, this group of scholars who really know to put themselves into the scholarship became family members to one another. There is a home for Bible translators in Yad HaShmona by these people here, who are both scholars and also able to
cooks and house cleaners and
like to one of them, his wife called from abroad and said, "What are you doing?" "I'm washing dishes." "You are washing dishes?" You know, and because we are looking for servants. We're looking for servants, and we are one body, and that way we can serve also in that fashion to one another. So you to your people, thank you for making this course go through. Now, I'm very happy to have the honor of introducing our dear friends at the Rotbeck School, who was very much responsible for the fact that the Rotbeck School has been so positive to us, I believe. Joel Nesson, who was here 10 years, our boss, as the head of the special programs. And he loves us, and we love him. And every graduation ceremony, we bring him to give us Divrei Torah. And this time too, he was very happy to come. He did teach you with the Zoom, as did the Tanya Notarius. And so, please, Joel Nesson, I have the honor to invite you here.
I have the privilege every year of speaking to the graduating class. I'm interested to know, by the way, how are you going to get back to your countries? That's another story. And for me, it's always a pleasure, as having been one who brought this program here and supported it for the years that I served here at the Rothberg School. And it's always, for me, a very, very, very big privilege and pleasure to be here. I want to talk about 2 things today. And I want to take them from things that we have recently read in the Torah. One has to do with translation. The other has to do with a topic that I always like to talk about, and that is leadership. Well, let's start with translation. We are now reading, or just finished reading, the book in the parasha in the book of Bamidbar, in chapter 15. It's called Chukat, and it begins with probably one of the strangest mitzvot that we have in the Torah. And I'm going to quote, because I want to talk about this thing called Chok. וידבר אדוני אל משה ואל אהרון לאמור, זאת חוקת התורה, אשר ציווה אדוני לאמור, דבר אל בני ישראל ויקחו אליך פרה אדומה תמימה, so forth and so on. This is the mitzvah of what is called the red heifer. Para aduma. And it is described as a chok. But if we look at the pasuk, we have so many other words in here. Zot chukat haTorah, right? The chok of the Torah. Asher tziva, commanded, mitzvah. Adonai lemor daber el bnei Yisrael. Daber also is a form of mitzvah because we know what's going to come after it. When we see daber el bnei Yisrael, we know that this is going to be something serious. And then he goes on to describe the whole business of the red heifer, and what you're supposed to do during this. First of all, what kind of a cow it has to be. Something that didn't have a yoke on its back. Temimah. Very interesting description. The ceremony is just amazing. The purpose is cleansing somebody who had contact with a cadaver, with a dead body. And so what? What is this thing called chok? And there are a number of chukim. There are a number of mitzvot, call that mitzvah, which is a generic term, that we have in the Torah that we sort of go, what? What is this all about? It's not a mishpat. Mishpatim have to do with social justice, for the most part. And in the book of Vayikra, we have a lot of mishpatim, actually throughout the whole Torah, but especially in Vayikra, we have a lot of mishpatim. It's sort of all Hammurabi. This is what you can do for your neighbor, this is what your neighbor should do for you, and so forth and so on. How you live in a society. Mishpatim. We also know about Edot. Elu ha-Edut. Right? We read on Pesach. The bad son says, what's all this business? What are these chukim? What are these Edot? What are these mishpatim that you talk about? Edut has to do with a historical event. Aid, I'm a witness to some kind of a historical event. So we have the mishpat, which is in a world of a social context. We have this edot, which is in the sense of a historical context. And then we have chok. You guys are translators. I don't know how much of the Torah you've done. What do you do with chok? How do you explain this? Just a commandment? This is what God said? I'm not going to go into the myriad of commentaries about the concept of chok. I'll give you another example. Sha'atnez. We have a description, we have two descriptions actually, in the Torah of Sha'atnez. What is Sha'atnez? You don't mix two things that are not compatible with one another, that should not be mixed. So Sha'atnez is Tzemer Ufishtim Yachtav. We have the wool, and we have the linen, and you don't make clothes out of these two things together. Why? It's not a historical event. I don't know that Moshe Rabbeinu, when he went up to Har Sinai, was wearing a cloak of Sha'atnez. God made him take it off. No, no, no. It's not a historical, doesn't make a historical event. There's no social aspect here. It's a chok. So when we translate this, how do we translate? How do we think about this kind of term? Not an easy one. In most places in the English, you'll see it translated as statute. Chok le'olam, by the way, and it says this about the red heifer. Chukat olam. This is a chok that's never going to go away. This is something you will always do. Of course, it did go away because we no longer have a tabernacle. We no longer have a temple. So why do we have this thing here? We no longer have to do this ceremony in order to mix up all of the things that go with the burning of the ashes and the hyssop and the wood, and make this, then put it in water and drink it, and Chok olam, chukat olam. Something that you're going to have to wrestle with. I'm not going to answer it for you, I can't. And as I said, you have a myriad of commentaries. Rabbis talk about this all the time. The Talmud raises it all of the time. Maimonides says, the Rambam says, medieval Jewish philosopher says, you know what, I think it's there only to give us the pleasure of doing a mitzvah. No other reason. We get to do the pleasure of doing this mitzvah, not because it's historical, not because there's social justice, but because it was commanded. See, something I think, as you look at the text in context, you're going to have to look at very, very, very seriously. That's the first piece. The second piece is a piece about leadership. We are reading in the same parasha that we read last Shabbat in the synagogue, of the death of 2 out of the 3 most important people who took the Israelites out of Egypt. Miriam dies, and Aaron dies. Moshe's still around. But we already have a hint about what's going to happen to him, because he didn't speak to the rock. He hit the rock, and God says, you're not going in. You're not going to be able to lead the people into Israel. So we already have this hint. We are in the last year of a 40-year journey. 2 out of the 3 central people are now dead. Boy, you don't think that shook up Bnei Yisrael? What happens with Aaron? Aaron is told by Hashem, by God, to take Elazar ben Aaron HaKohen, his son, up to the mountain with him. And there Aaron took off his clothes, put them on his son, anointed him, all according to God's plan. All according to what God told Aaron to do. And they stood before Kol Ha'edah. They stood before the entire congregation of the people of Israel. And the people of Israel watched this. So they knew that even though Aaron was gone, there was a successor. They witnessed it. They saw it. It's not England. It had to be appointed. It was not by right. The right was in God's hands. With Miriam, we don't have a replacement. We don't. She was a high counselor. She was there at Moshe and Aaron's side all of the time. There as counsel. We don't have a replacement for her. The only replacement that we have right now is for Aaron. And then, just a few chapters later, not all that long, I'm not talking about the whole last book of the Torah, which is just one long speech. But not that long after, Moshe then is told to go up to a different mountain and take with him Yoshua and stand before Kol Ha'edah, so that the people know that there is a continuation, there's a continuity, that Yoshua is commanded by God to take over. There is a saying that we have in Kohelet: Dor holech v'dor ba, v'ha'aretz le'olam omedet. Generations die, generations come. Everything remains the same. The world will always exist. Now let's look at you. You all here are the sons and daughters of Aaron. You all here are those who will take over from Moshe. You all here, by virtue of being here, by virtue of studying here, by virtue of working on the translations that you are working on, are the new generation. Dor holech v'dor ba. You are that new generation of leaders who will be able to inspire others, just as Elazar did, and just as Yehoshua did. V'ha'aretz le'olam omedet. You will continue to work le'olam. And when it comes time for you to pass on your mantle to a younger generation, to a generation more sophisticated, and we see it happening all the time. Look at Corona. Look at how much sophistication that came out of that in terms of technology. So just look at yourselves now. Feel yourselves in that leadership role. Because that is your commandment. That is your work, and the work is holy work. This is what you were told to do. Not by your parents, but by a higher spirit that says, This is something that's important. This is something that has to continue until the entire Tanakh is available to everyone in the world, speaking any language they speak. I wish you much success in your work. I praise you for your work, and I congratulate you on finishing this study period. Thank you.
My privilege to let you hear a message from Murray Salisbury, who was your teacher B'Chesed Elyon of biblical Hebrew.
קודם כל, למנהלים המכובדים של האוניברסיטה העברית בירושלים, אני מודה לכם שהמקום הזה הוא מקום של למידה, מקום מעולה ומצוין של למידה עבור הגויים של העולם. And to Halvar and Miria, and to all the instructors and staff of JCBT, I also want to thank you and to honor you for this world-changing work that you are doing to spread the word into other languages by upskilling those who are already actively involved in that work. And to the invited guests at this celebration, thank you also for your support of this work that remains unique in the world, in that it not only teaches the text in context, but it also provides a home away from home where students involved in similar kinds of work to each other, but in vastly different kinds of settings, can forge deep and long-lasting relationships with each other. And they do continue to support each other long after they have returned home. I know this because in Mexico earlier this year, before the lockdowns, one of my former JCBT students asked me for a selfie with him because all of his fellow students spread all over the world are still very much in touch with each other in a WhatsApp group. And last but not least, to you students, kol hakavod lachem, well done to each and every one of you. The class of 2020 is special. No, I don't say that every time. I've never said it before, but the word special does apply to you. Like the students in previous years, you have endured many hardships and challenges. You've been away from your families and cultures. Like them, you've had to get used to living in close quarters with strangers who have become your friends. But in this year of lockdowns and restrictions, you've had to show greater resilience and patience and determination to keep going. You have demonstrated a great love of learning and a high degree of respect for each other and for the text. I know this because each time I get to teach the last few weeks of this long program. Some of those previous students spent their last few days with one foot on the plane home and their mind was partly elsewhere. But you were still fully engaged with the text and with the classes right up until the very last hours and minutes of the course, despite spending those last 3 days with 3 problematic texts from the prophets. And that was after a day in Job, another day in Kohelet, and 3 days looking at some of the most impenetrable 2-line proverbs. And that was after spending over a week with some of the more challenging psalms to translate well. So again, kol hakavod lachem, well done to each and every one of you. When this course module on biblical Hebrew poetry began 3.5 weeks ago, I pulled out this folded sheet of paper and I told the students that this is my job, to spend all day, every day, unfolding. But now I want to move on to the next stanza of the poem, where the grammatical person changes and new participants become the main actors, because you students are no longer the untrained ones, as the net translation translates this word pitayim, in Psalm 119, verse 130. You have moved up from line B of this verse to line A of this verse, from the untrained Petayim, as it were, to the bringers of light, to the unfolders of God's word. At this, your graduation ceremony, we collectively confer upon each and every one of you the title, Unfolder of God's words. And as you fulfill that role, you will bring light into your communities to dispel the darkness. The task before you is not an easy one. It is to bring to a text all of the knowledge and skills that you've been learning these past 5 months, using all the tools you now have in your toolbox, to unfold that text in such a way that brings the light of understanding. Your task may be complex, but your calling is simple, to do nothing more than to simply unfold what is there in the text, to unfold these words in such a way that enables their inherent light to shine forth for your readers and your hearers. The light is already there in the text. The light was given to the authors 2,500 years ago, or in some cases a lot longer ago than that. The authors wrapped up that light that was given to them in their sacred writings, and these words have endured for 2.5 millennia, maybe up to 3.5 millennia or so. In every generation since then, there have been those who have been looking for that light that these words can bring. But they need it in their language. To unwrap these words for the language group in which you are working is your privilege, your calling, and your awesome responsibility. And what is that light that this verse talks about? It's the light of understanding, but it's also the light of revelation. Revelation of truth. All the things that we long for in this world, justice, peace, harmony, can only come when the light of truth dispels the darkness of discord, disharmony, and discrimination. True justice needs the sure foundation of truth, a universal standard of what is right and what is wrong. It is the light of this true, reliable standard of morality that dispels the darkness, as more and more people learn to use that light to discern between what is good and what is not good. And we can almost see that word between, or bain, in this word for discerning, can't we? Understanding, mevin, to bring understanding, to bring the ability to discern between what is right and what is wrong. And you students have been practicing the skills needed to look at all the possible ways of understanding the text and to discern between them in order to find the interpretation that is most likely to be the right one. So keep on learning, keep on practicing, keep on unfolding these words. This is just the beginning. Don't stop learning, don't stop practicing, don't stop unfolding the text. The text is the real hero in this story. Don't let your ego get in the way. Don't let your newly acquired knowledge puff you up and block out the light. Simply unfold these words and let them shine their own light. In closing, I want to give special thanks to you, Maria, for the conversation we had the very first time I met you. That was 30 years ago, and it changed the course of the rest of my life. I am due to teach here again in November, but even if I were never to teach here again, I will always be enormously grateful to you for that once-in-a-lifetime, life-changing encounter. And I also want to thank the Hebrew University once again for sponsoring and supervising and hosting these courses, and for being a spreader of light to the nations. Ani modeh lachem mi'omek libi. Toda rabah l'kulam. Thank you.
For me, Murray himself is somewhat of a hero. He had terrible acute pneumonia some years ago and got vasculitis. If you were wondering how to be thankful, just open a medical dictionary and everything you don't know what it is, thank God you don't know what it is. This is a disease where the immune system attacks your blood vessels and constricts them. And he's been fighting that now for about 2 or 3 years. So I covet your prayers for him that he could recover. And he was struggling with tiredness on this session with us, and his contribution is just so valuable. But now I would like you to fasten your seatbelts because it says insights from texts and context. Student team. One thing I did was require after every field trip that a student had, for their own sakes, to write down their impressions of that day. Because after you travel, it's hard even to remember your own experiences. And out of reading them, and out of a special request for the sake of this PowerPoint, to share some insights. What did you think before? What do you think now after you have been here? And words, just how truthfully vivid are they, or flat? Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. Yerdefuni. Well, there's a word, la'akov, for follow. That's not what the text says. It says, pursue me. And our daughter once drew a picture of this. I don't have the picture, but it was 2 lambs chasing a little girl. Chasing! Pursuing! So, you know, you don't need to know this level of vividness in order to get a lot out of the scriptures already, but how much more? Not just follow, it pursues. Descriptions, how accurate are they or how misleading? Yerushalayim harim savivla. Hills around Jerusalem. Well, we've had students from Manipur, northeast India, and look at how there's a plains area here in the middle, and then mountains all around, and here's what it looks like. And that was the picture that our Bible translator had. Jerusalem harim savivla, that maybe, 20, 30 kilometers off in the distance there were mountains, and not that it was hills, and Jerusalem's right in the hills. Or what about the image of Be'er or Bor? There are countries, like on the right, in India, where they don't have cisterns because there's so much water that you just dig down and pull the water up out of a well, or you've got massive rivers. But look on the left, where you see you have to channel water from a spring, or you have a hole in the ground that you dig and plaster and you store the water there. And so look what it says in the text. Let's throw Joseph into one of the wells, is what many translations say. Well, he would have drowned. Well, here this translator at least knew that it wasn't a well. He should have got it straight, threw him into a cistern that was dry, but at least he says dry well, which doesn't make too much sense because most wells are dug because they have water at the bottom. How about plants, familiar or unknown? There are areas in the world who don't have any grapes at all. My wife sent a welcome basket with an American student to a student from another country who picked up the grapes and said, "What are these?" The American couldn't believe his ears. He said, "They're grapes." The fellow says, "Oh yeah, I've read about them. Are they good to eat?" And the American says, "Yeah, try it." And there are places that don't know what to do with all this vineyard imagery that you have in the scriptures. And all these different verbs of, Vayas Kehu, Yiskelehu, and what's a migdal and what's a yekev, and these images of barren hillside that you have to clear the stones and plant the vines and build guard towers and hedges, stone walls with thorns. So how are you going to understand Isaiah 5:5? I will remove its hedge and it will be devoured, and I will break down its wall. Or how about rainfall? There are countries where it's constant. I was in a town in Norway where it rained every single day of the year. Now they had some days of sunshine, but it was at least a shower every day. And so what's it like where David was shepherd? on the outskirts of Bethlehem, where you have the Judean desert, and you've got a rainy season and a dry season. You have the Moreh and the Malkush at the end, beginning and the end of the rainy seasons. And it's not two rainy seasons, it's just the beginning and the end. And some people need to understand that. Summer in the Judean desert, and not very much more grass even in the wintertime in the Judean desert where David was shepherd, and rare springs of water. Or if not, then you have to have a well where the shepherd or shepherdess can pull out the water. He makes me lie down in green pastures. Well, some places there's greenery, bin ot deshe, but neot deshe is rare patches of grass. It's not like Wisconsin or New Zealand where you don't need a shepherd at all. You just put up a fence, there's no natural enemies, there's plenty of food, there's plenty of water, but in the Judean desert you've got this kind of lush grass at the most, you know, in January, February, and rare patches of grass, and you understand the total dependence of the sheep on the shepherd. Very different image than if you grew up where there's so much. A rainy season connected with the holidays of Pesach, the barley harvest, Shavuot, the wheat harvest. The dry season, Sukkot, where you have all these other fruits that are harvested over the summer. And so you have this challenge that so many of the translators are not aware of the environment of the authors and the audiences of the original scriptures. And so if they come here and they learn the source language in the original context, the land, then they've got a fighting chance to do a lot better. Or customs clash between Israelite and Canaanite. Here's Ahab and Jezebel, Israelite and Phoenician. And Ahab wants Naboth's vineyard. Naboth says no. And the Israelite king, Ahab, accepts. And Jezebel thinks he's ridiculous. Goes and lays down in bed with his face to the wall instead of killing Naboth, and taking the vineyard. And so she arranges to have that done. Archaeology, does it support or disprove scriptures? There have been excavations at Tel Gath where they found evidences of what the Bible says, that King Hazael of Damascus, way up in the north, had gotten way down into the Philistine plains and conquered Gath. And 2 Kings 12 fought against Gath and took it, and then went up to Jerusalem, but the king paid him off. So he decided not to fight and went home. But on the way from Damascus to Philistia and Jerusalem, he obviously had to go by Tel Dan, and here's Tel Dan with the arrow pointing to the gateway. And here's the gateway, and it's been restored. And you can see a diagram of what the Israelite gateway looked like 3,000 years ago. But then look what they found in the plaza outside the gateway. They found this stone. It's about this big, where you can see it compared to humans. And on that stone, you have written right there by the red arrow, Beit David. It's the first time that David's name has been mentioned outside of scriptures. And so what did the archaeologists do who say that the Davidic dynasty never existed? David and Solomon never existed? The Israelis just planted it. But said, wait a minute. It's not in Hebrew, it's in Aramaic. And it's king of Damascus bragging that he has defeated the house of David. Oh, that's just how clever the Israelis are. And you realize it's not a problem of intellect and evidence. It's a problem of will, of emotions. I don't want to believe that the Bible is true because there are things that say about human beings, including me, that I don't like. And so they prefer to try to put the Bible out of existence. And look at here, Lachish in the Judean foothills, mentioned in the Bible as being conquered by the Assyrians, who then go up and fail to conquer Jerusalem. The Babylonians who conquer Lachish and then go up and do conquer Jerusalem. And here on this prism that's about this big, you have written in cuneiform script of the Akkadian language of the ancient Assyrians, "As for Hezekiah the Jew, he did not submit to my yoke, and so I carried off over 200,000 of his people. I destroyed 46 of his fortified cities, and himself I caged like a bird in a cage." And that's all he can say, because the Bible tells us that they, yes, surrounded Jerusalem, but the angel of the Lord interfered and they retreated, and Jerusalem was spared. A little over 100 years later, Jerusalem was not spared. So they should have lost their faith in the God of Israel. Wasn't able to protect Jerusalem. But in the meantime, you have the prophets who had warned and warned and warned that if you abandon God, he will remove his protection. So they were able to understand this is not because their gods are stronger, gods of all those other peoples that have disappeared from history, but that God removed his protection. So what's the impact of all this? Even students who are Bible translators and believers, the grand impact of the reality of it all is strong. And here's this diagram that's become popular in postcards and symbols around Jerusalem, and even at the entrance to the exhibits, at the Southern Wall excavations, the center there. Jerusalem in the middle between Europe, Asia, and Africa. And the Bible verse that says, "I have placed Jerusalem in the center of the world." And talk about the impact of what has gone out from Jerusalem. The lighter the color, the less corrupt is the country. This is Transparency International Index of Corruption, 140 countries. The darker red the color, the more corrupt. Greed, corruption, dictatorships, revolutions. It's not just a matter of impacting one's personal life, it's an impact, like the Bible promises, the country that follows my precepts. I mean, all countries have law and law books. Which country, which people other than the Jews takes a law book and embraces it and dances with it and has an annual holiday, Simchat Torah, the rejoicing of the Torah? Law, that's one of the disasters in Bible translation. Yes, of course it's law, but it's guidance, it's instructions, it's teaching. God loved us so much that he gave us these instructions, and he said, choose life and not death. So I want to thank the students who shared the excitement of these various discoveries, whether it was right in the text, pursue and not just follow me, goodness and mercy, tov v'chesed, and the things they've seen that have been different from where they come. And so with that, I would like to turn it over to the student team who's done a video of life at the Jerusalem Center for Bible Translation.
עזרה וצרות
the Lord is good.
Okay, now it's time for the Hebrew songs that were inserted in your programs.
שלום, שמי מג, או דיבורה. אנחנו אוהבים לשיר לאדוני מהמקרא, וגם היום אנחנו רוצים לשיר לאדוני וגם לכם. אם ידעתם את השיר האלה, שירו עמנו. בבקשה. הראשון, הודו לאדוני כי טוב. Sadeh Aleph has been one of our favorites as a group during our time together, so we're happy to share it with
As Yochanan said at the beginning of this evening, I was also told that this program, the first program of this program was held 25 years ago, and since then, almost 172 mother tongue translators have learned Hebrew and related studies in the program in order to bring the Hebrew Bible into the lives of people around the world.
Amen.
It's great. This is really heartwarming. Jerusalem is the obvious location for such a program, as is written in Yeshaya chapter 2, כי מציון תצא תורה ודבר השם מירושלים. And in English, for out of Zion shall go forth the law, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. I would like to thank those who have devoted themselves to this program over the years, to Miriam and Yochanan, Ronen. Miriam and Yochanan, I must say that when I first met you, I noticed the sparkle in your eyes. Immediately when you spoke about the program, about this program, and I understood that you are made of the right material that makes dreams come true. This material includes a lot of passion, stubbornness, love, love and devotion. Love and devotion. And I want to thank you for that. I also want to thank Shelly Amir,
Amen.
the director of the Division of Special Programs of the Rothberg International School. And I want to extend my thanks to you, the graduates, who make this program so important and worthwhile. I know that the last 3 months, 4 months, were not easy because of the current pandemic. And still I hope that you succeeded to utilize the fullest your time here in Israel and enjoyed it. I saw the pictures and I understand that you did. May your work be blessed, and may you and your beloved ones be healthy and have a safe trip home, Yafit.
And now, Shelley?
So we've all been waiting for this, right? For this past hour and a half. And it's a pleasure to present you with these certificates. These are the proof of your hard work during this past 5 months. You had your plans, but the coronavirus had its own plans, and it's changed your track. But despite all the challenges, you made it, and you're here, and we're here with you. And I want to use this opportunity to thank Miriam and Yohanan, all the staff and instructors. I have no doubt that without your dedication and hard work, we won't be here. So thank you. I want to thank also Ms. Fischer and Professor Noam Shogal, the provost of Rothberg School, for their continuing support. And again, it's an honor for me to be part of this and your accomplishments and achievements. And thank you for spreading the word of the Bible across the world. Good luck, everyone. Have a safe trip back home. Use your mask at all times.
אמן. תם ונשלם טקס של המרכז הירושלמי למתרגמי תנ"ך. אמן. תודה רבה למשתתפים וגם לסטודנטים באמת.